In the world of power, silence is often the greatest strategy. For 5 years, I let them believe I was nothing, a housewife without purpose or ambition. My husband Sonny and his smug friends never suspected that the woman they mocked over dinner was actually signing their paychecks. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't swift or loud. It's patient, calculated, and served at precisely the right moment. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That evening, sitting at the corner of our marble dining table, nursing a glass of green tea while they drank expensive scotch, I watched them laugh. Sonny, with his perfectly styled hair and the custom suit I had financed without his knowledge, was in his element. He loved playing host, especially to his inner circle of real estate executives who wore designer watches to casual dinners just to outshine one another. Tonight, they'd found their entertainment. Me, Akiko. Sweetheart, Sonny called across the table, his voice dripping with that particular condescension he reserved for me in front of his friends. Why don't you tell everyone about your day? The room quieted, 5 pairs of eyes turning to me expectantly, amusement already dancing in them before I'd even spoken. It wasn't the first time he'd used me as the punchline to his jokes, but tonight, he was particularly bold. Perhaps the 30-year-old McAllen had loosened his inhibitions. I went to the community garden, I said softly, my Japanese accent still present despite my 15 years in America. And then I read for a while. Mario, Sonny's right-hand man and senior vice president of acquisitions at Horizon Realty Group, couldn't contain his smirk. That's it? The whole day? I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. That's the thing about playing a role. You have to commit to it completely, even when it cuts deep. I wanted to tell Mario that his latest acquisition proposal had significant tax liability issues that I'd flagged just that morning, or that I knew he had inflated 3 property valuations last quarter. But I didn't. Not yet. Akiko is still adjusting to American life, Sonny explained to the group, as if I weren't sitting right there, as if I hadn't been here for over a decade, as if I hadn't graduated from Keio University with honors before, earning my MBA from Harvard. Finding a job has been challenging for her. Liam, head of marketing, leaned back with his tumbler in hand. Language barrier, I bet? Must be tough. My English was perfect, better than his if we were measuring. Grammar and vocabulary. I had negotiated 9-figure deals in this language. But in their eyes, I was just Sonny's decorative foreign wife. A beautiful, quiet accessory he'd brought back from a business trip to Tokyo. At least she knows her way around the kitchen, Ben added with a wink. Japanese women make the best wives, traditional, you know? Supportive. Clyde raised his glass in agreement. Sonny hit the jackpot. A beautiful wife who doesn't drain the bank account with a career of her own. They all laughed, their chuckles bouncing off the vaulted ceilings of the house I had purchased. The house they all thought belonged to Sonny, thanks to his supposed brilliance in real estate development. Funny how none of them questioned how a mid-level executive at Horizon Realty Group could afford a $4.2 million home in this neighborhood, or the limited edition Aston Martin in the garage. They believed what they wanted to believe because it was easier, and I let them. Remember that time Akiko thought she could be a real estate agent? Sonny said, his eyes glinting with amusement. She spent weeks studying for that licensing exam. What score did you get again, honey? I remained silent, allowing him his moment. He didn't know that I owned not just a real estate license, but a broker's license in 3 states. Or that I controlled the majority stake in Horizon Realty Group through a complex web of investment vehicles. That I had been personally selected by the aging founder, Mr. Tanaka, as his successor, a decision kept private until the appropriate time, which was rapidly approaching. She didn't even pass, Sonny continued, filling in my silence with his fabricated narrative. Turns out real. Estate isn't as easy as arranging flowers and making sushi. More laughter. I took a small sip of my tea, allowing my gaze to drift to the antique Japanese scroll hanging on the wall, a gift from Mr. Tanaka before he passed. It depicted a seemingly dormant volcano with the kanji for patience and power elegantly brushed beside it. None of our guests had ever asked about its meaning. They never really looked at anything in my home. Not the art, not the books in my native language that contained business strategies and investment theories, and certainly not me. You know what she does all day? Sonny continued, now fully committed to his performance. She watches real estate shows and gives me advice on which properties the company should invest in, like watching HGTV makes her an expert. I had, in fact, identified the Westlake development opportunity that had saved Horizon from a disastrous third quarter last year. I had quietly slipped the research onto Sonny's desk, allowing him to present it as his own discovery. The commission from that deal had paid for the watch he was now flaunting. To be fair, Mario added, turning to me with what he probably thought was kindness, real estate is complicated. It's not for everyone. It's all about instinct, Clyde declared, swirling his scotch importantly. You either have it or you don't. I nodded pleasantly, playing my part. What they didn't know was that tomorrow morning at exactly 9 a.m., when the board meeting was called to announce the new chairperson following Mr. Tanaka's passing, they would learn exactly what kind of instincts I possessed. More drinks? I offered, standing to play the perfect hostess. As I walked to the kitchen, I caught Sonny's whispered words to Ben. I love her, but seriously, sometimes I feel like I'm supporting a child, not a wife. A man needs a partner. You? No, someone with ambition. The words stung as they always did. But tonight, they were also fuel. Every dismissive comment, every condescending smile, every time they spoke about me as if I weren't in the room, it all strengthened my resolve for what was coming. In the kitchen, I checked my phone. A message from Mr. Tanaka's attorney confirmed our early meeting before the board announcement. All the documents were prepared, the succession plan ready to be revealed. In less than 15 hours, Sonny and his friends would discover that the woman they had belittled for years was not just part of Horizon Realty Group, she was about to become its chairman. I returned to the dining room with another bottle of scotch, placing it on the table with the practiced grace of a woman who knew her place. Sonny barely acknowledged me, too busy telling the group about his latest brilliant negotiation, a deal I had restructured after hours when he thought I was asleep. Let them laugh tonight, I thought. Tomorrow, none of them would have anything to laugh about. The dinner party dragged on well past midnight, each hour marked by another round of drinks and increasingly blatant disrespect. I maintained my mask of quiet submission, nodding and smiling, at appropriate intervals while my mind calculated the precise impact of tomorrow's revelation. Akiko, be a dear and bring us some coffee, Sonny called out, not bothering to look in my direction. The good beans, not that cheap stuff. I rose silently, feeling Clyde's eyes follow me as I walked to the kitchen. Of all Sonny's friends, he was the most obvious in his condescension. As director of operations at Horizon, he prided himself on efficiency, something he had made clear he found lacking in me. Your wife is something else, Sonny, I heard Clyde say as I left the room. Beautiful, quiet, obedient. They don't make them like that anymore. She has her uses, Sonny replied, his voice carrying easily to the kitchen. Though I wouldn't mind if one of those uses included bringing in an actual income. The coffee machine hummed as I prepared their drinks, my hands steady despite the fury building inside me. They didn't see me check my phone again. A message from Yumi, Mr. Tanaka's daughter and my closest ally at Horizon. Everything is set for tomorrow. Dad would be proud. Mr. Tanaka had been more than just the founder of Horizon Realty Group. He had been my mentor. We had met during my final year at Harvard when he gave a guest lecture on international real estate development. He had recognized something in me that day, a hunger for success combined with a patience most Americans lacked. When he offered me a position at his company, I accepted immediately. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What no one knew, not even Sunny when we first met, was that I had risen quickly through Horizon's ranks. Within 3 years, I was managing their international acquisitions, focusing primarily on Asian markets, where my language skills and cultural understanding proved invaluable. Mr. Tanaka had begun grooming me as his successor long before his illness became apparent. Then I met Sunny. He was charming, attentive, and seemed to appreciate my intelligence. We married after a whirlwind romance, and that's when everything changed. Suddenly, my husband, a mid-level executive at the same company, couldn't handle the fact that his wife outranked him. His ego was too fragile to withstand the comparison. Men need to feel powerful, Mr. Tanaka had advised me during a private dinner after noticing tension between Sunny and me, especially American men. Sometimes, Akiko-san, the path to true power requires a strategic retreat. And so began my elaborate deception. With Mr. Tanaka's blessing, I officially stepped down from my position, seemingly becoming a housewife while continuing to work directly with him through secure channels. My official resignation allowed Sunny's star to rise unimpeded, his confidence growing with each promotion that I secretly orchestrated. For 5 years, I lived this double life, the quiet, supportive wife at home and the sharp, decisive executive in private meetings with Mr. Tanaka. When his health began failing last year, he accelerated our succession plan, transferring controlling shares to me through a series of holding companies that even the board wasn't fully aware of. "Appearances can be deceiving, Akiko-san," he had said during our final meeting, his once powerful frame diminished by illness. "You have learned this lesson well. Now you will teach it to others." He died 3 weeks ago. His will, with its full revelations, would be read to the board tomorrow morning. I returned to the dining room with a tray of coffee cups, my face a perfect mask of servitude. Mario was in the middle of describing his latest conquest, not a property, but a woman from the accounting department. "She's fresh out of college, completely starstruck by my position," he boasted, accepting his coffee without even a glance in my direction. These young ones are so easy to impress. What Mario didn't know was that I had received 3 separate harassment complaints about him in the past month alone. They had been sent to the anonymous ethics email that only Mr. Tanaka and I monitored. Those complaints were now part of the comprehensive files waiting in my private safe. "Speaking of positions," Ben interjected, his words slightly slurred, "that new development in Westlake is going to position us perfectly for the market upswing. Sunny, your team deserves a bonus for finding that opportunity." Sunny preened under the praise, straightening his expensive tie. "It's all about vision," he declared, conveniently forgetting the research folder I had strategically placed in his briefcase. Seeing potential where others don't. I sat quietly in my corner of the table, observing them all while they ignored my presence. Each of them had vulnerabilities I had documented meticulously over the years. Liam had been manipulating marketing expenditures, funneling money to a consulting firm owned by his brother. Ben had deliberately hidden structural issues in 2 properties last quarter to speed up closings and secure his bonuses. Clyde had created a hostile work environment that had driven away 3 talented female executives. And Sunny, my husband, had been taking credit for other people's work for years, building his reputation on ideas that weren't his own, including many that had come from me. "Akiko doesn't understand the first thing about vision," Sunny continued, warming to his favorite subject, my supposed inadequacies. "Last month, she suggested we look into affordable housing projects. Affordable housing, can you imagine the profit margins on that?" The group chuckled appreciatively, none of them aware that my proposal, which I had intentionally mentioned to Sunny knowing he would dismiss it, had actually been fully researched and developed into a comprehensive plan that would open up new government subsidies and tax advantages for Horizon. The plan sat in my private files, ready to be implemented once I took control. To be fair, Liam said, raising his coffee cup, not everyone has the mind for business. Some people are meant to support those who do. Exactly, Sunny exclaimed, reaching over to pat my hand condescendingly. And Akiko is the perfect support system. Aren't you, sweetheart? I smiled demurely, lowering my eyes. I try my best. She's a good sport, Sunny told the group. Knows her limitations. If only he knew the true limitations in this room, the limitations of their vision, their ethics, and most of all, their understanding of who they were really dealing with, as the clock struck 1 in the morning. I began clearing dishes, my movements deliberate and unhurried. In 8 hours, everything would change. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m., but I would arrive at 7:30 to meet with Mr. Tanaka's attorneys and review the final details of the succession plan. Let them enjoy their final hours of ignorance, I thought, watching them laugh and boast. Tomorrow, the mask comes off. The house finally fell silent around 2 a.m. after Sunny's friends departed in their luxury cars, each man slightly unsteady from the evening's indulgences. I moved through the rooms with practiced efficiency, gathering, abandoned glasses and wiping away the evidence of their presence while Sunny sprawled on the sofa, scrolling through his phone. You outdid yourself tonight, he said without looking up. Mario mentioned how impressed he was with the food. I'm glad they enjoyed it, I replied, keeping my voice soft and appreciative of the rare compliment, though it was clear he was praising my servitude rather than my person. They're important connections, Akiko. Those men in there, they're the future of Horizon. He set his phone down and looked at me with what he probably thought was patient kindness. That's why I wish you'd make more of an effort to be interesting to them. All that silent geisha routine, it worked when we were dating, but these are sophisticated businessmen. I paused my cleaning, the term geisha routine sending a flicker of anger through me. The casual racism had become so commonplace I sometimes wondered if he even recognized it anymore. What would you suggest? I asked, genuinely curious about how he envisioned my role in his carefully constructed social hierarchy. Sunny sighed, running a hand through his expertly styled hair. I don't know. Take some classes, maybe? Find a hobby that sounds impressive when they ask what you do all day. Charity work looks good. Maybe join the board of something small. Nothing too demanding, of course. The irony nearly made me smile. While he was suggesting I find a small board to join, I was preparing to take control of a real estate empire worth billions. But I simply nodded, playing my part until the final curtain. I'll think about it, I promised, collecting his empty glass. You have the board meeting tomorrow, right? The announcement of Mr. Tanaka's successor? Sunny's expression darkened slightly. Yeah, probably going to be that dinosaur Wallace from the East Coast Division. Old Tanaka always had a soft spot for him. Not Mario? I asked innocently, knowing exactly how Sunny felt about his supposed best friend potentially outranking him. Mario? He snorted. No chance. Between you and me, he's not half as smart as he thinks he is. Gets the credit for my ideas half the time. He stretched and yawned. Though I wouldn't be surprised if they look outside the company. Tanaka was always unpredictable. More than you know, I thought. What time is the meeting? I asked, though I had memorized the schedule weeks ago. 9, he mumbled, already losing interest in the conversation. But I'm heading in early to prep. Liam and I are aligning on the quarterly marketing presentation. I'll make sure your gray suit is pressed, I said, knowing it was his favorite. For important meetings, the subtle power moves were so ingrained now that they felt almost natural. The supportive wife, anticipating his needs, bolstering his confidence. You're good to me, Akiko, he said, his tone suggesting he was bestowing a great compliment. A lot of American women wouldn't put up with my hours, my ambition. I smiled, the expression not quite reaching my eyes. I was raised to support my husband. That's what I love about you. Traditional values. He stood, stretching again. I'm heading up. Don't stay up too late cleaning. Your eyes get puffy when you don't sleep, and we have that charity dinner tomorrow night. I watched him climb the stairs, confident in his position in life, secure in his superiority. Once he was out of sight, I moved to my small office off the kitchen, the one room in the house that was truly mine. Sonny rarely entered it, dismissing it as my hobby room where I practiced calligraphy and read Japanese novels. Behind the sliding bookshelf, however, was a state-of-the-art workstation where I conducted my real business. I entered the passcode and pressed my thumb to the hidden scanner. The shelf slid silently aside, revealing the command center of my operation. 3 monitors came to life, displaying real-time data from markets across Asia where it was already midday. I had a video call scheduled with our Tokyo office in 20 minutes to finalize the details of an acquisition that none of the current Horizon executives, including Sonny, knew about. Before making the call, I opened a secure drawer and removed 5 thick files, one for each of the men who had dined at my table tonight. These weren't merely performance evaluations. They were comprehensive dossiers detailing every ethical breach, every inflated number, every instance of credit stolen and harassment covered up. Mario's file was the thickest. His habit of pursuing young employees had created significant liability for the company, all meticulously documented by the HR director who reported directly to Mr. Tanaka and now to me. Attached was a USB drive containing audio recordings from his office, the microphones installed during last year's security upgrade that he had so casually approved without reading the documentation. Liam's file contained a complete audit of the marketing department's financials, clearly showing the pattern of funds diverted to his brother's shell company. The transactions were cleverly disguised, but not cleverly enough to escape the forensic accountant I had hired specifically to review his department. Ben's file included inspection reports and emails proving he had knowingly concealed structural defects in properties to accelerate sales. The potential legal ramifications were severe, not just for Horizon, but for Ben personally if homeowners ever discovered the truth. Clyde's documentation included exit interviews and formal complaints from 12 female employees over the past 3 years, all describing a pattern of dismissive, hostile behavior toward women in positions of authority. His personnel file also revealed a pattern of promoting men with inferior qualifications over more experienced female candidates. Finally, I opened Sonny's file. Unlike the others, his ethical breaches were more subtle, taking credit for others. Work wasn't technically illegal, just deeply unprofessional. But there were other issues. Expense reports that didn't quite match his actual activities, client meetings that never happened, inflated projections to secure larger budgets for his department. I closed the files and placed them in my briefcase for tomorrow's meeting. Then I made the call to Tokyo, speaking rapid-fire Japanese with the acquisition team there. We finalized the purchase of a prime development property, a deal that would significantly expand Horizon's Asian footprint and one that would be announced after my new position was secured. It was nearly 4 a.m. when I finally shut down the system and concealed the workstation once more. I climbed the stairs quietly, passing the guest bedroom where I'd been sleeping for the past month, citing Sonny's snoring as the reason for the separate arrangements. The truth was I couldn't bear his touch anymore, not after years of diminishment and disrespect. In the master bathroom, I washed my face and stared at my reflection. Tomorrow, no, today, I would shed this mask I'd worn for so long. The thought brought both anticipation and a strange sense of loss. Playing this role had been exhausting, but it had also been a kind of protection, a way of observing unnoticed, of gathering information without scrutiny. I laid out my clothes for the morning. Not the casual wear of a housewife, but the armor, of an executive. A sharply tailored charcoal suit, understated but unmistakably expensive. Pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother, a successful businesswoman in post-war Japan when such things were nearly impossible. Beneath the hollow base of their jewelry box sat the final piece of Mr. Tanaka's plan, a custom-designed signet ring bearing the Horizon logo and the chairman's distinctive mark. As I slipped into bed, I heard Sonny's steady breathing from the master bedroom across the hall. He slept the untroubled sleep of a man who believed his world was secure, his position unassailable. Let him sleep, I thought. In a few hours, the alarm would wake him to a reality very different from the one he expected. The alarm chimed softly, at 5:30 a.m. I silenced it quickly, my body tense with anticipation, despite having slept barely an hour. This moment, the quiet before everything changed, deserved acknowledgement. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the first hint of dawn through the window, and allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. 5 years of calculated deception. 5 years of swallowing my pride, of watching incompetent men make decisions I could have made better, of hiding my intelligence behind a veil of docile femininity. Had it been worth it? The question had haunted me increasingly in recent months. Mr. Tanaka had understood the strategy, the power of being underestimated, the advantage of seeing people's true nature when they believed you posed no threat. But he hadn't fully grasped the personal toll it would take. "You have the patience of the mountain," he had told me once, referencing the volcano on the scroll in my dining room. Still and quiet on the surface, but with tremendous power beneath. I rose and moved silently to the shower, letting the hot water wash away my doubts along with the last vestiges of sleep. Today wasn't about the past. It was about claiming the future I had earned. From the bathroom, I heard Sonny's alarm go off, followed by his heavy footsteps and the sound of the coffee maker grinding beans downstairs. My morning routine was precisely calculated. I would emerge only after he had showered and dressed, maintaining our familiar choreography one last time. When I finally descended the stairs at 6:45, Sonny was at the kitchen island, scrolling through emails on his tablet while absent-mindedly eating the breakfast I had prepared the night before. "Big day," I said, pouring myself a cup of green tea. He glanced up briefly. "Just another board meeting, though I suppose the chairman announcement is a big deal." "Are you nervous?" I asked, watching his expression carefully. He scoffed, his ego preventing him from acknowledging even the possibility of anxiety. "Why would I be nervous? Nothing changes for me either way. I run my division, and I run it well." I nodded, taking a small sip of tea. "What time will you be home tonight? Should I keep dinner warm?" "Don't wait up," he replied, already returning his attention to his emails. "After the announcement, there'll be drinks, networking. Could be late." "Of course." I kept my voice neutral, though I knew exactly how the day would unfold, and it wouldn't include celebratory drinks for Sonny. He stood, gathering his things without really looking at me. "You have that charity thing tonight, right?" "Yes," I confirmed. The charity thing was actually a private dinner with Yumi Tanaka and the company's major international investors, my official introduction as Horizon's new chairman. But Sonny had never paid attention to the details of my social calendar, dismissing my occasional appearances at philanthropic events as attempts to alleviate boredom. He checked his watch, the Patek Philippe I had given him for our anniversary, its cost far exceeding what his position at Horizon could reasonably afford. Another piece of evidence he had willfully ignored, too caught up in his own narrative to question the inconsistencies. I should get going, want to touch base with the team before the meeting. On any other morning, he would have left with barely a goodbye. Today, perhaps sensing something significant in the air without consciously acknowledging it, he paused at the door. "You know, you really should think about what I said last night. Finding something to occupy your time. It would be good for you." The concern in his voice might have seemed genuine to an outsider, but I recognized it for what it was. concern for how my perceived idleness reflected on him. "I'll consider it," I said, offering the placid smile he expected. "Good luck today." He nodded and left, the door closing behind him with a definitive click. I remained perfectly still for a moment, listening to his car start and pull away. Then I moved with sudden, decisive energy. First, I called Yumi to confirm she would meet me at the attorney's office before the board meeting. Then I contacted security at Horizon headquarters to ensure my private entrance would be accessible, an entrance established by Mr. Tanaka years ago for discreet meetings, unknown to most employees. Finally, I changed into the suit I had prepared. The transformation from submissive housewife to corporate leader, as much psychological as physical. With each button fastened, each smooth line adjusted to perfection, I reclaimed a piece of myself that had been deliberately hidden away. The signet ring was last. I removed it from its hiding place and held it up to the light, watching the subtle engravings catch the morning sun. It was more than jewelry. It was a symbol of succession, of responsibility, of power rightfully earned and too long deferred. As I slipped it onto my finger, a wave of emotions threatened to overwhelm me: pride, anticipation, resolution, but also a surprising thread of sadness. Despite everything, there had been moments of genuine connection with Sunny in the early days. Moments when I had glimpsed the man I thought I was marrying before his insecurities and ambitions revealed his true character. I had loved him once. Perhaps part of me still did, buried beneath layers of disappointment and resentment. That complicated the day ahead, made it more than a simple business transaction. This wasn't just about claiming my rightful position. It was about ending a marriage built on false pretenses. My phone buzzed with a message from my driver, waiting discreetly down the block as arranged. I gathered my briefcase containing the 5 files that would reshape Horizon's executive structure by day's end. Before leaving, I took one last look around the house that had been my beautiful prison for 5 years. The carefully curated space spoke volumes about the dynamic between Sunny and me, his golf trophies prominently displayed while my academic achievements remained boxed in the attic, his American sensibilities dominating every room except my small office. Even the art on the walls reflected his taste rather than mine, with one exception: Mr. Tanaka's volcano scroll, the only piece of my heritage Sunny had allowed, because it added exotic flair to the dining room. Soon, I would have a new home, one that reflected all facets of my identity without compromise. But this house, for all its emotional complications, had served its purpose. It had been the stage for my most convincing performance, one that was about to reach its final act. The car ride to the attorney's office was quiet, giving me time to center myself for what was to come. I reviewed the day schedule once more. 8:30 a.m., meeting with Mr. Tanaka's legal team. 8:45 a.m., arrival at Horizon headquarters. 9 a.m., board meeting and succession announcement. 10:30 a.m., executive restructuring discussion. 12 p.m., company-wide. Announcement 4 p.m., meeting with international investors. Compan, dinner with Yumi and key stakeholders. By midnight, Horizon Realty Group would be irrevocably transformed, and so would my life. When I arrived at the attorney's office, Yumi was already waiting. Mr. Tanaka's daughter had been my ally from the beginning, one of the few people who knew the full scope of her father's plans for me. At 45, she was 15 years my senior and had deliberately stepped back from day-to-day operations at Horizon to pursue her own interests, supporting her father's decision to groom me as his successor. "Ready?" she asked simply, rising, to greet me with a respectful bow. I returned the gesture, feeling a calm certainty settle over me. "I've been ready for 5 years." She smiled, a flash of her father's shrewd intelligence in her eyes. "He would be proud, not just of what you're about to do, but how patiently you've prepared for it." Together, we entered the conference room where 3 attorneys waited with the final documents. For the next hour, we reviewed the succession plan, the updated corporate structure, and the strategic announcements to be made throughout the day. At precisely 8:30 a.m., we finished. I signed the last document with a steady hand, officially accepting my position as chairman and CEO of Horizon Realty Group. The weight of the moment wasn't lost on anyone in the room. A Japanese woman taking control of a predominantly male American company in an industry still marked by significant gender disparities. Tanaka-san would say this is just the beginning, the senior attorney remarked as he sealed the documents. He would be right, I replied, rising from my seat with newfound authority. And we have a board meeting to attend. The private entrance to Horizon's headquarters opened with my fingerprint, a security feature installed years ago but rarely used during my self-imposed exile. The executive corridor was quiet at 8:40 a.m. Most of the board members and senior staff gathered in the anteroom outside the main conference room, waiting for the 9 a.m. meeting to begin. I took the service elevator to the 32nd floor, emerging in a discreet alcove that offered a perfect vantage point of the gathering executives without immediately revealing my presence. Yumi had gone ahead through the main entrance, her appearance causing no stir as she was an expected attendee for her father's succession announcement. From my position, I could see Sonny holding court near the refreshment table, surrounded by his usual satellites, Mario, Liam, Ben, and Clyde. Their postures radiated confidence, the easy camaraderie of men who believed themselves untouchable. They laughed too loudly, occupying more space than necessary, a physical manifestation of the entitlement they'd cultivated. "Wallace looks nervous," I heard Liam say, gesturing subtly toward an older man standing alone near the windows. "Maybe. He knows something we don't." "Please," Sonny replied dismissively. The old man might have liked him, but the board knows the company needs new blood, not another dinosaur clinging to outdated methods. Mario chuckled, adjusting his Italian silk tie. "My money's still on external recruitment. Probably some hotshot from Goldman or Morgan Stanley to shake things up." "Whoever it is," Ben added, lowering his voice slightly. "They'd better understand how things work around here. We've built this company into what it is today." The audacity of that statement nearly made me step forward prematurely. These men had built nothing. They had inherited a thriving company from Mr. Tanaka's careful stewardship and proceeded to coast on its existing momentum while inserting inefficiencies and ethical compromises at every turn. Clyde nodded in agreement. "First order of business. For the new chairman should be reviewing that diversity initiative HR keeps pushing. Complete waste of resources, if you ask me. Merit should be the only consideration." The irony of Clyde invoking merit while systematically undermining qualified female employees might have been amusing if it weren't so infuriating. I checked my watch. 8:52 a.m. Time to make my entrance. But before I could move, Sonny's voice rose. Again, this time loud enough to carry across the anteroom. "Speaking of diversity," he said with a smirk, "I had to listen to my wife go on about how Horizon should invest in affordable housing last night. Can you imagine? The profit margins would be a joke." "Your wife?" Mario chuckled. "Isn't she the one who couldn't even pass the real estate exam?" "The very same," Sonny confirmed, his tone dripping with condescension. "Sweet woman, beautiful, great hostess, but completely clueless about business. Still, I let her talk. Makes her feel included." The group laughed, that particular laugh of men who share a joke at someone else's expense. I felt a cold fury settle in my chest, not just at the mockery, but at the casual dismissal of an idea that would actually increase Horizon's profitability through tax incentives and government subsidies if they had bothered to run the numbers as I had. "You know what's funny?" Sonny continued, apparently emboldened by his audience. "She actually thinks she understands the real estate market because she reads those glossy international design magazines. Last week, she tried to tell me about property trends in Tokyo." "Tokyo?" As if she has any idea what drives the commercial market there. The international Asian market was, in fact, my specialty. The very reason Mr. Tanaka had recruited me. I had overseen the acquisition of 3 major properties in Tokyo's financial district, transactions that had increased Horizon's portfolio value by nearly 30% in my active years with the company. Women, Clyde said with a dismissive wave. My wife's the same. Thinks watching home renovation shows makes her an expert. At least Akiko knows her place, Sonny replied, straightening his tie. She doesn't try to compete with me professionally. Nothing worse than a wife who thinks she's smarter than her husband. The boardroom doors opened then, and the company secretary appeared, clipboard in hand. Gentlemen, the meeting will begin momentarily. Please take your seats. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. As the group moved toward the boardroom, I stepped out from the alcove, my presence immediately drawing attention. Conversations faltered as heads turned, expressions shifting from confusion to surprise as executives registered my appearance. Not as Sonny's quiet wife in casual clothes, but as a sharply dressed professional whose demeanor radiated authority. Sonny was the last to notice, too absorbed in continuing his commentary to Mario. When he finally saw me, he froze mid-sentence, his brow furrowing in confusion. Akiko, what are you doing here? I approached with measured steps, my heels clicking purposefully against the marble floor. Good morning, Sonny. My voice was calm, professional, a tone he had never heard from me before. I believe the meeting is about to start. His confusion deepened, morphing into embarrassment as he glanced around at his colleagues. There must be some mistake. This is a closed board meeting for the chairman announcement. I'm aware, I replied simply, walking past him toward the boardroom doors. He moved quickly to intercept me, lowering his voice as he gripped my elbow. This is inappropriate. You can't just show up at my workplace like this. Whatever this is about, we can discuss it at home. I looked pointedly at his hand until he released my arm, uncertainty flickering across his face. Mr. Reynolds, came a voice from behind us. It was Mr. Tanaka's senior attorney, approaching with Yumi at his side. I see you've met Ms. Tanaka. And Ms. Nakamura. Excellent. Shall we proceed inside? The board is waiting. Ms. Nakamura? Sonny repeated, his confusion evident. You mean my wife? The attorney looked between us, his professional mask slipping just enough to reveal surprise. Your wife? I was unaware of your connection to Ms. Nakamura. How interesting. He turned to me with a respectful nod. We're ready when you are. Thank you, I replied, maintaining my composure though I could feel Sonny's growing agitation beside me. Akiko, what is going on? He demanded, his voice rising slightly. Why is he talking to you like that? I met his gaze directly, allowing him to see perhaps for the first time the woman I truly was. Not the compliant, deferential wife he thought he had married, but a professional equal. No, not equal. His superior in every sense that would soon matter within these walls. It's time for the meeting, I said quietly. All your questions will be answered inside. His friends had gathered around now, their expressions ranging from amusement to confusion. Mario leaned in, not bothering to lower his voice. Sonny, what's she doing here? Did she follow you to work or something? Clyde chuckled. Separation anxiety? My first wife used to pull stunts like this, showing up unannounced, embarrassing me in front of colleagues. I turned my gaze to Clyde, allowing a slight edge to enter my voice. I assure you, Mr. Peterson, my presence here is entirely professional and expected by those who matter. Boardroom doors opened fully then, and the company secretary appeared again. The board is seated and waiting. Ms. Nakamura, Mr. Sato asks that you take the chairman's position at the head of the table. The secretary's words landed like a thunderclap in the suddenly silent anteroom. I watched understanding dawn on Sonny's face, followed by disbelief. Then a flash of anger quickly masked by desperate denial. "There's been a mistake," he said, looking between me and the secretary. "My wife isn't. She doesn't." "Thank you," I said to the secretary, ignoring Sunny's sputtering. "Please inform the board I'll be right in." As the secretary retreated, I faced Sunny and his stunned friends one last time before entering the boardroom. "Gentlemen, I believe it's time to begin the meeting. We have much to discuss about the future of Horizon Realty Group, including its leadership and ethical standards." Without waiting for a response, I walked through the doors, feeling the weight of Mr. Tanaka's signet ring on my finger and the lightness of finally shedding a role that had confined me for too long. Behind me, I heard Mario's confused whisper, "What the hell is happening?" It was a question they would all have definitive answers to very soon. The boardroom fell silent as I entered, 20 pairs of eyes tracking my movement toward the chairman's seat at the head of the massive oak table. Most board members knew me only as a footnote in company gatherings, Sonny Reynolds's quiet Japanese wife who occasionally appeared at holiday parties. Their expressions ranged from polite confusion to open bewilderment. Mr. Sato, the company's longtime legal counsel and Mr. Tanaka's most trusted advisor, stood as I approached. "Ms. Nakamura," he said with a respectful bow, "on behalf of the board, welcome." I returned the bow slightly, then took my place at the head of the table. Behind me, Sonny and his friends filed in, taking their designated seats along the periphery of the room where non-board executives could observe proceedings. The tension emanating from their corner was palpable, a stark contrast to their carefree arrogance just minutes earlier. "Before we begin," I said, my voice clear and commanding in a way none of them had heard before, "I'd like to thank you all for your presence today at this important transition point for Horizon Realty Group." One of the older board members, Williams, if I recalled correctly, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Pardon me, but there seems to be some confusion. We were expecting Mr. Tanaka's successor announcement today." "That's precisely why we're here," Mr. Sato interjected smoothly, distributing folders to each board member. "If you'll review the documents before you, everything will become clear." The room filled with the sound of rustling papers as the board members opened their folders. Inside was a comprehensive dossier, my complete professional history with Horizon, documentation of Mr. Tanaka's succession plan, financial statements showing my controlling interest in the company, and the legal certification of my appointment as chairman and CEO. From the corner of my eye, I could see Sonny straining to glimpse the contents of the nearest folder, his face a mask of confusion and growing alarm. Beside him, Mario whispered something, but Sonny shook his head sharply, eyes never leaving me. "As you can see," I continued once they'd had a moment to review the materials, "Mr. Tanaka selected me as his successor several years ago. We've been working closely to ensure a smooth transition following his passing. But you've been absent from company operations for 5 years, another board member objected, flipping through the pages with a furrowed brow. "Your resignation letter is right here, dated 2019. My official resignation, yes, I acknowledged. But as Mr. Tanaka's private succession plan indicates, I continued to work directly with him on strategic initiatives. My departure from public-facing roles was part of a long-term strategy to observe company operations from a unique perspective. The implications of this statement weren't lost on anyone in the room. Several heads turned subtly toward the executives seated along the wall, the very people I had been quietly observing and evaluating all these years. "This is highly irregular," Williams protested, though with less conviction as he continued reading the impeccably prepared legal documentation. "On the contrary," Yumi interjected from her seat near mine. "My father was always deliberate in his planning. Akiko was his chosen successor long before his illness. Her qualifications are exceptional, her experience unmatched, particularly in international markets. The board's role today is not to approve this succession, but to acknowledge it. The legal transfer of power is already complete. To emphasize this point, I removed a final document from my portfolio, the official certification of my controlling interest in Horizon Realty Group, now representing 53% of all voting shares. Ms. Nakamura, Williams began again. Chairman. Nakamura, Mr. Sato corrected gently but firmly. Williams paused, reassessing the power dynamics that had shifted so dramatically in the space of minutes. Chairman Nakamura, he amended. This is unexpected. Change often is, I replied, allowing myself the first hint of a smile. Now, shall we proceed to our second agenda item? The restructuring of our executive leadership team. At these words, the tension in the room sharpened perceptibly. Sonny shifted in his seat, his knuckles white where they gripped the armrests. From my briefcase, I withdrew 5 more folders. Red, unlike the blue ones distributed to board members. Mr. Sato, would you please distribute these to Mr. Reynolds, Mr. Castellano, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Harrison, and Mr. Walsh? I asked, referring to Sonny, Mario, Clyde, Ben, and Liam by their proper names. As the red folders made their way to their recipients, I continued addressing the board. Over the past 5 years, while working directly with Mr. Tanaka, I've conducted a comprehensive review of Horizon's operations, with particular focus on ethical compliance, financial management, and organizational culture. Sonny opened his folder, his face draining of color as he scanned its contents. Beside him, Mario's expression shifted from confusion to alarm to something approaching panic. My findings, samples of which are in the folders now being reviewed by the gentleman in question, revealed significant areas of concern, I continued. These include financial improprieties, violations of our ethics code, and leadership practices incompatible with Horizon's values and future direction. This is outrageous, Clyde suddenly burst out, halfway through his folder. These accusations are fully documented and independently verified, I finished for him. Each file contains primary evidence collected over multiple years, witness statements, and forensic accounting reports where applicable. The board will receive comprehensive summaries following this meeting, but I wanted the individuals involved to review their personal files first, a professional courtesy. The room had gone deathly quiet. Even Williams seemed at a loss for words. As the gravity of the situation became apparent, Akiko, Sonny finally spoke, using my first name inappropriately for the setting, a last desperate attempt to reframe our relationship into the familiar dynamic where he held power. We should discuss this privately. Whatever you think you found. Chairman Nakamura, I corrected, meeting his gaze directly. And there is nothing to discuss privately, Mr. Reynolds. The evidence speaks for itself. Your misconduct, along with that of your colleagues, has been thoroughly documented and verified. I turned back to address the entire board. As my first official act as chairman, I am terminating the employment of these 5 executives, effective immediately. Security has been instructed to escort them from the building following this meeting. Their access credentials have already been revoked. The boardroom erupted then, Sonny and his friends protesting loudly while board members attempted to ask questions over the din. I allowed it to continue for precisely 15 seconds before raising my hand for silence. Remarkably, the room complied. This decision is not subject to debate, I said calmly. It is merely being communicated as a courtesy to the board. The restructuring plan for the affected departments is outlined on page 12 of your briefings. I glanced at the ornate clock on the boardroom wall. We will take a 15-minute recess. When we reconvene, we will discuss Horizon's new strategic direction, beginning with our expansion into affordable housing development and our strengthened presence in Asian markets. As I stood, signaling the break, Sonny made one last, desperate attempt, his voice cracking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. You can't do this, he said, rising from his seat. I'm your husband. The room fell silent again, all eyes moving between us. I regarded him steadily, allowing the full weight of the moment to settle before responding. Correction, I said quietly. You were my husband. The divorce papers are in the final section of your folder. My attorneys will be in touch regarding the separation of assets. The 15-minute recess stretched into 20 as security quietly entered the boardroom to escort Sonny and his colleagues to their offices to collect personal belongings. I remained seated at the head of the table, reviewing notes for the strategic presentation while board members huddled in small groups, their whispered conversations a mix of shock and rapid recalculation of where they stood in this new reality. Yumi approached, taking the seat beside me. That was quite an entrance, she said in Japanese, her voice low enough that only I could hear. It was overdue, I replied in the same language, allowing myself a moment of candor away from English speaking. Here's the husband part. That was unexpected, she admitted. Father never mentioned that complication. Your father knew, I said, sorting my presentation materials. He advised me to keep my personal and professional lives completely separate. Sonny never knew who I really was because Mr. Tanaka and I agreed it was safer that way. Yumi studied, me with her shrewd eyes so like her father's. Safer for the company, perhaps. But for you? Before I could answer, the boardroom door opened again. Mr. Sato entered, followed by the board members who had stepped out during the break. Their demeanor had changed subtly, less confused, more calculating as they reassessed their positions in the new power structure. The executives have been escorted from the building, Mr. Sato informed me quietly as he took his seat. There was some resistance, particularly from Mr. Reynolds. Anticipated, I replied. Are the transition teams in place? He nodded. Interim department heads have been notified. They'll be joining us for the full staff announcement at noon. Excellent. I stood, addressing the reconvened board. Shall we continue? For the next hour, I led the board through my vision for Horizon's future, a strategic pivot that would maintain our luxury developments while expanding into previously untapped markets. I outlined the affordable housing initiative that Sonny had so casually dismissed, demonstrating with precise financial projections how government incentives and tax advantages would actually increase our profit margins while improving our public image. I detailed our expanded Asian strategy, leveraging my connections in Tokyo, Singapore, and Seoul to access markets that our competitors had failed to penetrate. I introduced innovative financing structures that would reduce our exposure during economic downturns while maximizing growth during boom cycles. With each slide, each perfectly articulated strategic initiative, I watched the board's expressions transform from skepticism to interest to unmistakable approval. By the time I concluded with a 5-year growth projection that doubled our current valuation, even Williams was nodding in agreement. Questions? I asked, closing my presentation folder. There were many, but they were no longer challenges to my authority. They were substantive inquiries about implementation timelines, resource allocation, and integration strategies, the kinds of questions posed to a leader whose vision they had accepted. As the meeting concluded, board members approached one to offer congratulations and pledge support. Their rapid adaptation didn't surprise me. These were business people first, and they recognized a strong position when they saw one. My controlling interest in the company made opposition futile, but my strategic vision made cooperation desirable. The true test would come at noon, when I would address the full staff and publicly take control of the company that had been mine, in shadow for years. I was reviewing my notes for this address when the boardroom phone rang. Mr. Sato answered, his expression growing concerned as he listened. Chairman Nakamura, he said after hanging up, there's a situation in the lobby. Mr. Reynolds has returned and is demanding to see you. Security is detaining him, but he's causing a scene. I checked my watch, 11:30 a.m. The company-wide announcement is in 30 minutes. Please have security hold him in the executive conference room on the second floor. I'll speak with him briefly before addressing the staff. Yumi caught my arm as I prepared to leave. Is that wise? She asked in Japanese. He seems unstable. Some conversations are necessary, I replied, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of what lay ahead. This needs to end cleanly. The executive conference room on the second floor was far enough from the main auditorium that any disturbance wouldn't disrupt the company announcement. When I entered, Sonny was pacing, his earlier confidence replaced by a volatile mix of anger and desperation. His tie was loosened, his perfectly styled hair disheveled, as if he'd been repeatedly running his hands through it. He froze when he saw me, his expression hardening. 5 years, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled age. 5 years of lying to my face every single day. An interesting perspective, I replied, remaining near the door. From a man who spent those same years mocking and belittling his wife in front of his friends and colleagues. That was different, he snapped. That was just talk, just guys. Being guys. He gestured around us, indicating the company, the situation, the complete inversion of the power dynamic he had believed in. This is my life, my career. And what you did wasn't my life, I asked, allowing a hint of the hurt I'd suppressed for years to surface. Being treated like a decorative accessory, having my intelligence questioned, my ideas dismissed, being used as the punchline to your jokes? He had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable, but his self-preservation quickly overrode any hint of remorse. You could have told me, he insisted. If I had known who you really were. You would have what? I interrupted. Respected me? Valued my opinions? Treated me like an equal? I shook my head. We both know that's not true. You showed me exactly who you are, Sonny, when you thought I was powerless. He changed tactics, desperation creeping into his voice. We can fix this. Whatever issues we have personally, they don't have to affect our professional relationship. I've been a valuable asset to Horizon, my client list, my connections. Your misconduct is extensively documented, I said, cutting him off. The inflated projections, the misrepresented meeting reports, taking credit for others' work, including mine. Your termination stands. His facade cracked then, anger overwhelming calculation. You vindictive bitch. You planned this all along, didn't you? Married me just to spy on me, to set me up for some twisted revenge fantasy. I regarded him calmly, his anger breaking harmlessly against the certainty I had cultivated through years of patience. I married you because I loved you, Sonny. I believed you loved me too. The real me. Not just the quiet, supportive wife you wanted me to be. This truth seemed to confuse him more than anything else I'd said. He stared at me, his anger momentarily sidetracked by genuine bewilderment. Then why the deception? Why pretend to be something you weren't? I didn't, at first, I said quietly. But you made it clear you couldn't handle a wife who might outshine you professionally. Remember our fight after the Westlake property? When I suggested improvements to your proposal and you didn't speak to me for 3 days. You said you needed to be the man in our relationship. Recognition flickered in his eyes. One of the few times in our early marriage when I had fully displayed my business acumen before learning to hide it. So I made a choice, I continued. I stepped back publicly while continuing my work with Mr. Tanaka privately. I had hoped that as your confidence grew, you might become secure enough to accept my success alongside your own. Instead, you became more dismissive, more condescending with each promotion. His shoulders slumped slightly, the righteous indignation draining away as the truth of my words penetrated his defenses. What happens now? He asked, his voice subdued. Now, I have a company to lead, I said, checking my watch. The divorce papers require your signature within 30 days. My attorneys will handle the details. Your personal belongings from the house have been packed and will be delivered to wherever you specify. I turned to leave, but Sonny's voice stopped me at the door. Was any of it real? he asked, and for the first time since I'd known him, his voice held no trace of arrogance or calculation, just raw vulnerability. Did you ever love me at all, or was I just part of your grand plan? The question deserved an honest answer. I turned back to face him. The first 2 years were real, I said softly. I loved your confidence, your ambition. I thought we were building something together. I paused, acknowledging the grief of what had been lost. But it changed, Sonny. Not just me hiding parts of myself. You changed too. Success didn't make you more secure. It made you more entitled. Each promotion made you more dismissive of those you perceived as beneath you, including me. He shook his head, but there was less conviction in the gesture. I provided for you. I gave you a beautiful home, vacations, anything you wanted. No, I corrected. You didn't provide those things. I did. My money, my work, my company. You just took credit like you did at work. I met his gaze directly. And what I wanted wasn't things, Sonny. It was respect, partnership, to be seen for who I really am. For a moment, something like genuine regret flickered across his face. Then his expression hardened again, self-preservation overriding insight. You'll regret this, he said, though his threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. I have connections, friends in this industry, who will all know by the end of the day exactly why you were terminated. I finished for him. The evidence is compelling, Sonny. The industry will distance themselves from you and the others. My advice? Take some time to reflect. You're talented when you apply yourself ethically. Perhaps this is an opportunity to rebuild on a more solid foundation. I left him then, his silence more telling than any retort he might have mustered. The security guard stationed outside the conference room would ensure he was escorted from the building after I was safely gone. As I walked toward the main auditorium where the company's employees were gathering for the announcement, I felt a curious lightness. The double life I'd been living, corporate strategist by day, submissive wife by evening, had taken a toll I hadn't fully acknowledged until the weight was lifted. Yumi met me at the auditorium entrance, concern evident in her expression. How did it go? As expected, I replied, straightening my suit jacket. He's angry, hurt, and trying to find someone to blame other than himself. She nodded, understanding the complexities better than most. And you? How are you feeling about all this? I considered the question carefully. Relieved, I said finally, and ready. The auditorium was filled to capacity. Over 300 employees from every department seated in anticipation of the announcement. Many looked confused, having heard rumors of the morning's dramatic events. Some seemed worried, which was understandable. Leadership changes often meant job insecurity. Mr. Sato approached the podium, his authoritative presence immediately hushing the murmurs rippling through the crowd. Good afternoon, he began formally. As many of you know, following the passing of our founder and chairman, Mr. Hideo Tanaka, the board has been engaged in succession planning. Today, I am pleased to introduce Horizon Realty Group's new chairman and chief executive officer, Ms. Akiko Nakamura. I stepped onto the stage, the sound of uncertain applause washing over me. From the expressions on many faces, it was clear. They were trying to place me, to understand who this unfamiliar Japanese woman was and why she now led their company. Thank you, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium as I took the podium. Some of you may recognize me, though perhaps not in this context. For the past 5 years, I have been working directly with Mr. Tanaka as his appointed successor, while maintaining a deliberately low profile. I paused, letting this information settle. Recognition dawned on some faces, employees who had seen me at company functions as Sonny's wife, but never suspected my true role. Before that, I served as Director of International Acquisitions, specializing in Asian markets. My history with Horizon actually predates many of yours. I was personally recruited by Mr. Tanaka 12 years ago after completing my MBA at Harvard. Whispers spread through the audience as people began connecting dots, revising their understanding of company history. This morning, the board formally acknowledged my position as chairman and CEO, a role I accept with deep respect for Mr. Tanaka's legacy and clear vision for Horizon's future. I then moved to the more difficult part of the announcement. As part of this transition, several executive changes have been implemented, effective immediately. Mr. Reynolds, Mr. Castellano, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Harrison, and Mr. Walsh are no longer with the company. The whispers intensified, unsurprisingly. These 5 men had been fixtures in Horizon's leadership for years. Their sudden, simultaneous departure was unprecedented. I understand this news may be concerning to those who reported. To these executives, I continued, my tone measured but firm. I want to assure you that these changes reflect specific leadership issues and are not indicative of broader restructuring or layoffs. Your positions are secure. Relief visibly washed over many faces. In fact, I added, one of my first initiatives as chairman will be implementing the employee profit-sharing program that Mr. Tanaka and I have been developing. Details will be distributed by the end of the week. That announcement generated the first genuine enthusiasm in the room, a strategic move I'd planned carefully. Mr. Tanaka had always believed that employees who shared in the company's success worked more diligently to ensure that success. For the next 20 minutes, I outlined my vision for Horizon's future, our expansion into new markets, our commitment to ethical business practices, and the cultural shift I intended to foster. I emphasized opportunity, innovation, and integrity as our core values moving forward. Change can be unsettling, I acknowledged as I concluded, but it also creates possibilities that didn't exist before. My door is open to your ideas, your concerns, and your aspirations for this company. Together, we will build on Mr. Tanaka's foundation to create something even stronger. The applause that followed was different from the obligatory response at the beginning, more enthusiastic, more genuine. Not universal, certainly. There would be those loyal to the previous leadership who would require time to adjust. But enough to confirm what Mr. Tanaka had always believed, that most people respond positively to authentic leadership, regardless of its source. As the employees filed out, many approached to introduce themselves or offer congratulations. I made a point of engaging genuinely with each one, demonstrating from the outset that my leadership style would be more accessible than my predecessors. By 1:30 p.m., the formal announcements were complete. The afternoon would be devoted to meeting with department heads, reassuring key clients, and beginning the implementation of transition plans developed meticulously over the past months. I returned to what was now my office, the chairman's suite, on the top floor with its panoramic views of the city. Mr. Tanaka's personal effects had been respectfully removed weeks earlier, leaving the space ready for its new occupant. I had already instructed facilities to redecorate, replacing the dark masculine furniture with a more modern, open aesthetic that reflected my own sensibilities while honoring the traditional Japanese design elements that Mr. Tanaka had valued. Standing at the window, I looked out at the skyline, at buildings I had helped acquire and develop over the years, often without receiving any public acknowledgement. That anonymity had served its purpose, allowing me to observe and plan without interference. But now, it was time to step fully into the light, to lead not from shadow, but from the front. My phone buzzed with a message from Yumi. Father would be proud. Dinner still on for tonight? I smiled, typing back a confirmation. Tonight's dinner with international investors would be my official introduction to Horizon's global partners, the beginning of a new chapter, not just for me, but for the company that had become my life's work. Another message appeared, this one from my attorney. Reynolds has vacated the residence. Security confirms no damages. Safe contents untouched. one more piece falling into place. By nightfall, I would return not to the beautiful prison where I had played the role of submissive wife, but to my own home, as my authentic self. The decision I had made 5 years ago to temporarily set aside my public identity in service of a longer-term goal had been painful but necessary. Mr. Tanaka had understood the strategic value of patience, of allowing others to underestimate you while you quietly built your strength. The volcano appears dormant, he had told me once, gesturing to the scroll that now hung in my dining room, until the moment it chooses to reveal its power. Today, I had finally made that choice. The afternoon passed in a carefully orchestrated sequence of meetings. Each department head was summoned individually to my office for brief but substantive discussions about their areas of responsibility. I had studied their personnel files, performance reviews, and project histories meticulously over the years, allowing me to ask pointed questions that demonstrated my intimate knowledge of their operations. Some appeared nervous, particularly those who had been closely aligned with Sonny and his circle. Others seemed cautiously optimistic about the change in leadership. A few, mostly women and international employees who had felt marginalized under the previous regime, barely concealed their enthusiasm. Naomi Chen, our brilliant head of digital strategy who had been consistently overlooked for promotion despite outperforming her male colleagues, was among the most visibly relieved. "I almost resigned last month," she admitted when I asked about her department's unusually high turnover rate. "Clyde blocked my advancement opportunities 3 times, always with vague concerns about my leadership readiness." "Your leadership capabilities are not in question," I assured her, sliding a folder across my desk. "This is the expanded digital initiative we'll be announcing next quarter. I'd like you to lead it with a corresponding title change to Senior Vice President of Digital Innovation and a compensation adjustment to match." Her momentary speechlessness was followed by composed gratitude, but the brightness in her eyes told me everything I needed to know about the impact of finally being recognized for her contributions. Similar conversations played out across the afternoon, not wholesale reorganization, but strategic adjustments that began shifting the company's culture immediately. By 4 p.m., I had met with 12 key department heads, each leaving with clear directives and, more importantly, a sense that their work was seen and valued by the new leadership. At 4:30 p.m., my executive assistant, formerly Mr. Tanaka's most trusted aide, announced the arrival of our international investors for the preliminary meeting before tonight's dinner. The conference room filled with representatives from our global financial partners, investment firms from Tokyo, Singapore, London, and Dubai, who had long supported Horizon's international expansion. Many had known me in my previous role as Director of International Acquisitions, though none had been aware of my continued involvement during my apparent absence. Ms. Nakamura, Mr. Watanabe, the senior representative from Tokyo's largest real estate investment trust, greeted me with a respectful bow. "It is good to see you in an official capacity again. Tanaka-san spoke highly of your continued contributions, though few of us understood the full extent of your role." "Mr. Tanaka valued discretion," I replied, returning his bow. "But now we can speak openly about our vision for Horizon's global presence." For the next hour, I outlined our expanded international strategy, addressing specific concerns from each market representative and demonstrating my thorough understanding of regional regulations, cultural considerations, and growth opportunities. The detailed knowledge I presented, from Tokyo's changing zoning laws to Dubai's new foreign investment framework, clearly impressed even the most skeptical investors. "I believe I speak for all of us," said Ms. Al-Fayez from our Dubai partners. As the meeting concluded, "When I say Horizon appears to be in very capable hands, we look forward to tonight's dinner to discuss these opportunities further." As they filed out to prepare for the evening event, Yumi remained behind, a small, satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "They're convinced," she said once. We were alone, particularly Watanabe. I've never seen him so enthusiastic about our projections. Watanabe-san appreciates preparedness, I replied, gathering my notes. And unlike some of our previous executives, I don't need to exaggerate our potential to impress him. Yumi nodded, her expression growing more serious. Have you seen the news? She slid her tablet across the table, displaying a financial news site where a small headline announced, "Shake-up at Horizon Realty. 5 top executives terminated as founder's protege takes control." It was inevitable, I said, scanning the article. The coverage was factual but limited, focusing on the appointment of a new chairman rather than the reasons behind the executive departures. That would change as more details emerged, but for now, the controlled narrative served our purposes. What about Sunny? Any more disturbances? Yumi asked. Nothing since this morning, I replied. My attorney reports he's checked into the Four Seasons downtown. Apparently, his corporate credit card still worked. An oversight will remedy by morning. I checked my watch. 5:45 p.m. I should head home to change before dinner. The car is waiting downstairs. Yumi walked with me to the elevator, her heels clicking in rhythm with mine across the marble floor of the executive suite, a subtle but powerful symbol of the company's new leadership dynamic. Father would be pleased, she said as we waited. For the elevator. Not just with the business transition, but with you finally reclaiming your identity. He worried about the personal toll of the strategy. The personal and professional are often intertwined, I replied, thinking of Sunny, of the marriage that had somehow transformed from a genuine connection to an elaborate charade. Sometimes sacrifices in one area enable success in another. The elevator arrived, its polished doors sliding open silently. Yumi squeezed my arm gently before stepping back. No more sacrifices, Akiko. From now on, you live on your own terms. I nodded, a curious emotion, part liberation, part melancholy, washing over me as the doors closed. She was right, of course. The deceptions, the careful performance of submission, the strategic diminishment of my capabilities, all of that ended today. Yet there was a strangeness to stepping fully into myself after so long in the shadows, like limbs tingling painfully as circulation returns. The car waited as promised, my driver opening the door as I approached. Home, Ms. Nakamura? Yes, I confirmed, settling into the back seat. But not the Reynolds residence. Take me to the penthouse on Riverside, please. He nodded, inputting the address of the property I had purchased 6 months earlier, a modern penthouse overlooking the river, designed to my exact specifications but kept empty until now. Tonight would be its first use, a physical manifestation, of my transition from hidden power to visible authority. As we drove through the evening traffic, I watched the city transform from the financial district's glass towers to the elegant residential neighborhoods along the river. My phone remained mercifully silent. No emergency calls from the office, no desperate messages from Sunny, no media inquiries requiring immediate attention. This moment of transition belonged to me alone, a brief quiet in the midst of a day that had permanently altered the trajectory of my life and the company I now officially led. The car pulled up to my new building, a sleek structure of glass and sustainable materials that embodied the innovative design principles I hope to incorporate into Horizon's future developments. The doorman, already briefed on my arrival, greeted me with respectful efficiency. Welcome, Ms. Nakamura. Everything has been prepared according to your instructions. The private elevator whisked me to the top floor, opening directly into my penthouse. The space was exactly as I had envisioned, open and light-filled, with traditional Japanese design elements harmonizing with modern architecture. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the river and city beyond, the fading daylight casting everything in a golden glow. In the master suite, I found the evening's attire already laid out. A custom Yoji Yamamoto dress in deep midnight blue, elegant, but powerful, with subtle embroidery incorporating the same volcano motif from Mr. Tanaka's scroll. No longer would I dress to diminish or deflect attention. Tonight's dinner required a visual statement as clear as the organizational changes I had implemented. As I prepared for the evening, I allowed myself to fully process the day's events. The confrontation with Sunny, the board meeting, the staff, announcement. Each moment had been a step toward reclaiming not just my professional authority, but my personal autonomy. The liberation was exhilarating, but it carried with it an unexpected poignancy. For all his faults, for all the ways he had diminished me, there had been moments of genuine connection with Sunny in the beginning. The seeds of a true partnership had been there before ambition and insecurity poisoned the relationship. I couldn't help but wonder if things might have been different had I confronted the issues earlier, had I refused to play the role he expected. But such reflections, while natural, served little purpose now. The decisions had been made, the consequences set in motion. My focus needed to remain on the future, horizons and my own. I fastened Mr. Tanaka's gift around my neck, a pendant of polished jade carved with the Japanese character for strength, given to me on the day he formally named me his successor. Its weight against my skin was a tangible reminder of his faith in me, of the responsibility I had accepted, and of the journey that had led to this moment. At precisely 6:45 p.m., my phone chimed with a notification. The car had arrived to take me to dinner. I took one final look in the mirror, no longer seeing the carefully constructed facade of Sunny Reynolds' quiet wife, but the woman I had always been beneath that mask, Akiko Nakamura, chairman and CEO of Horizon Realty Group, finally stepping fully into the light. The private dining room at Miyako, the city's most exclusive Japanese restaurant, had been transformed for the evening's gathering. Traditional shoji screens created an intimate atmosphere, while subtle lighting highlighted the authentic artwork and flower arrangements selected specifically for this occasion. Mr. Tanaka had often used this space for his most important meetings, valuing both its privacy and its embodiment of Japanese aesthetics in an American setting. As my car pulled up to the restaurant, I noticed several familiar vehicles already parked outside. The investors had arrived early, eager to continue our earlier discussions in a more relaxed environment. The restaurant's owner, Mr. Hoshino, greeted me personally at the entrance. "Nakamura-san," he said, bowing deeply. "It is an honor to host you in your new capacity. Tanaka-san would be pleased to see his wishes fulfilled." "Thank you, Hoshino-san," I replied, returning his bow. "Your discretion over the years has been invaluable." He smiled knowingly. Mr. Hoshino had been one of the few people aware of my continued work with Mr. Tanaka. Our private meetings often conducted in this very restaurant under the guise of language lessons or cultural discussions. "Your guests await you," he said, gesturing toward the private room. "I have prepared Tanaka-san's favorite sake for the traditional kanpai." I nodded my appreciation and followed him through the main dining area. A few patrons glanced up as we passed, their expressions showing flickers of recognition. The news of today's changes at Horizon was clearly spreading beyond financial circles. At the private room's entrance, Hoshino-san slid open the door and announced my arrival. Inside, 12 people rose from their seats around the low table. The international investors from our earlier meeting, Yumi, Mr. Sato, and 2 board members who handled our global relationships. Chairman Nakamura, Mr. Watanabe greeted me formally, setting the tone for the evening. The others followed suit, the use of my title and position confirming the transition from our previous working dynamic to this new reality. I took my place at the head of the table, with Yumi and Mr. Watanabe flanking me on either side. The traditional seating arrangement, with the most honored guests positioned furthest from the door, had been carefully planned to reflect both hierarchy and strategic relationships. As the first course was served, conversation remained general and pleasant, touching on market conditions and global trends rather than specific business matters. This, too, was deliberate, part of the ritual of relationship building that our international partners valued far more than American executives typically understood. It was during the second course that Mr. Watanabe steered the conversation toward more specific territory. "Nakamura-san," he began, his English precise but heavily accented, "your international strategy is most impressive. However, I am curious about your personal journey. Few of us understood the arrangement of these past years." The question was politely framed but direct. The others at the table quieted, equally interested in the answer. Mr. Tanaka and I recognized certain realities about our industry, I replied, choosing my words carefully. Real estate development, particularly at the executive level, remains dominated by specific perspectives. We believed that observing the organization from different vantage points would provide valuable insights unavailable through traditional management methods. Mr. Watanabe nodded thoughtfully. A strategic withdrawal to enable a more effective return. Very Japanese in its approach. Indeed, I acknowledged. Though not without its challenges. Ms. Alfayez from our Dubai partners leaned forward slightly. I imagine those challenges extended beyond the professional realm, given that some of the executives removed today were, I understand, personally connected to you. The room grew even quieter, the directness of her observation pushing at the boundaries of propriety in such a setting. But her position as our most significant Middle Eastern investor afforded her certain liberties, and the question was valid from a business perspective. Personal connections should never supersede professional ethics, I said, my tone firm but not defensive. The decisions made today were based on extensive documentation of conduct incompatible with Horizon's values and future direction. The board has reviewed this documentation and fully supports the actions taken. Mr. Sato nodded his confirmation, adding, "The transition has been in preparation for nearly 2 years, following established governance protocols. This seemed to satisfy the investors, who recognized the message beneath my diplomatic response. Personal relationships had not and would not cloud my business judgment, regardless of the circumstances." As the main course was served, Mr. Tanaka's favorite sablefish with miso, conversation shifted to specific expansion opportunities in Asian markets. I outlined our plans for the Tokyo development, the Singapore commercial hub, and our innovative approach to sustainable luxury residences in Seoul. The investors engaged enthusiastically, their initial curiosity about the day's dramatic events, giving way to genuine excitement about Horizon's future direction. By the time dessert was served, a subtle yuzu sorbet, the energy in the room had transformed completely from cautious assessment to collaborative planning. It was Mr. Watanabe who proposed the formal toast as sake cups were distributed. "To Horizon Realty Group," he said, raising his cup, "and to Chairman Nakamura, who honors Tanaka-san's legacy while boldly charting a new course. May this transition mark the beginning of even greater success." "Kanpai," replied the group in unison, completing the ritual that symbolically sealed their support. As we continued discussing specific projects late into the evening, I felt a growing certainty that the most critical external relationships had been successfully secured. The investors not only accepted the leadership change, but embraced the strategic vision I had presented. It was nearly 11 when the dinner concluded, each investor departing with renewed confidence in Horizon's direction and specific follow-up. Meetings already scheduled for the coming weeks. Yumi lingered as the others left, waiting until we were alone before speaking candidly. "Complete success," she said, switching to Japanese as she often did for our private conversations. "Particularly with Watanabe-san. He rarely offers such explicit support." "His support was always essential," I acknowledged. "Tokyo represents our largest growth opportunity in the coming fiscal year." "And personally?" she asked, her perceptive gaze searching my expression. "How are you feeling after today?" I considered the question carefully, aware that my relationship with Yumi transcended ordinary business connections. As Mr. Tanaka's daughter and my closest ally in the carefully orchestrated succession plan, she had witnessed both the professional strategy and the personal cost of its implementation. "It's been clarifying," I said finally, "like emerging from a long submersion." She nodded, understanding the complex emotions beneath my measured response. "The first day is always the most dramatic. Tomorrow will be about building, not revealing." "Yes," I agreed, gathering my things as Mr. Hoshino discreetly signaled that our car had arrived. The hard part isn't taking control. It's using that control effectively. We walked together through the now empty restaurant, the staff bowing respectfully as we passed. Outside, 2 cars waited, one to take Yumi to her downtown apartment, the other to bring me to my new home. "Will you be all right?" she asked as we prepared to part. "Your first night in the new place, after everything that's happened today." The concern in her voice touched me. In many ways, Yumi had become the sister I never had, our bond strengthened by shared purpose and mutual respect. "I'll be fine," I assured her. "I've been preparing for this day for years." She embraced me briefly, an unusual gesture for her, typically reserved demeanor, before stepping back with a warm smile. "Then I'll see you tomorrow, Chairman Nakamura." As my car pulled away from the restaurant, I finally allowed myself to exhale fully, the tension of the days carefully managed, confrontations and negotiations giving way to a quiet sense of accomplishment. Phase 1 was complete. The revelation of my true position had been executed precisely as planned, with minimal disruption to the company's operations and maximum impact on its future trajectory. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the practical work of implementing the strategic vision I had presented, managing the inevitable media inquiries, and solidifying the internal cultural changes I had initiated. But tonight, in this moment of transition between my old life and new, I permitted myself a rare feeling of personal satisfaction. The city lights blurred slightly as we sped toward my new home, the familiar skyline now representing something different. Not just the market I had helped develop from behind the scenes, but the visible manifestation of what could be accomplished when patience and strategic vision aligned with opportunity. The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, casting long shadows across the minimalist space I now called home. I had slept surprisingly well despite the emotional and professional intensity of the previous day, perhaps the result of finally releasing years of carefully maintained tension. My morning routine felt different here, unburdened by the need to maintain appearances or calibrate my behavior to Sunny's expectations. No more pretending to struggle with the financial section of the newspaper while secretly analyzing market trends. No more hiding my workout routine to avoid challenging his athleticism. No more preparing elaborate breakfasts I barely touched to maintain the illusion of the perfect housewife. Instead, I moved through the spacious rooms with efficiency and purpose, preparing for my second day as Horizon's official leader. Today would be about consolidation, reinforcing yesterday's revelations and beginning the implementation of changes long planned but only now possible to execute. My phone chimed with a message from Mr. Sato. "Press inquiries multiplying. Prepared. Statement ready for your review. Front page WSJ business section." I opened the attached image to find our story prominently featured. Horizon's hidden power player emerges. Tanaka protégé takes control after years in the shadows. The article was surprisingly accurate, focusing on my professional qualifications and Mr. Tanaka's long-term succession planning rather than sensationalizing the personal elements of the story. A second message arrived from our head of communications. "TV networks requesting interviews. How do you wish to proceed?" I considered this carefully. While transparency was important, becoming a media curiosity would distract from the substantive work ahead. My response was brief but clear. "Approved. Statement only for now. Single print interview with Financial Times next week. No TV. As I finished dressing in a tailored navy suit that subtly incorporated traditional Japanese design elements, I received the message I had been both expecting and dreading, an update from my attorney. Reynolds attempting to access joint accounts. Access denied per earlier instructions. His attorney has reached out requesting a meeting. So it began. I had anticipated this phase, of course. Sonny's initial shock would naturally evolve into strategic calculation once he consulted legal counsel. I forwarded the message to my personal attorney with simple instructions. Proceed as discussed. No deviations from the agreed terms. The prenuptial agreement was comprehensive and legally sound. While generous in providing a clean separation of our limited, truly joint assets, it clearly protected my individual holdings and company interests. Sonny would receive a fair settlement, reflecting our 5 years together, but nothing that could impact Horizon's operations or my controlling interest. My driver arrived precisely at 7:30 a.m., allowing me to reach the office well before most employees. This early arrival was deliberate. I wanted time to fully occupy the chairman's office, to transform it from a space I was visiting to a space I commanded before the day's meetings began. The security team greeted me with newfound deference as I entered through the main lobby rather than the private entrance I had used for years. No more shadows, no more hidden movements. From now on, my presence would be direct and visible. The executive floor was quiet, only Mr. Sato and my executive assistant already at their desks. Both stood as I approached, their posture reflecting the formality that naturally accompanied the office of chairman regardless of who occupied it. "Good morning," I greeted them, my tone warm but businesslike. "Are we prepared for the executive committee meeting at 9? "Yes, Chairman," my assistant confirmed. "All interim department heads have confirmed attendance. The presentation materials are ready in the boardroom." "And our former executives?" I asked, referring to yesterday's terminated leadership. Mr. Sato adjusted his glasses, his expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Castellano and Mr. Peterson have returned their company devices and signed the separation agreements. Mr. Harrison and Mr. Walsh are expected to complete processing by noon today." "And Mr. Reynolds?" A slight hesitation. "He has not responded to communications from HR. His company accounts remain active but frozen." I nodded, unsurprised. Sonny would resist the longest, believing his particular relationship with me might afford him special treatment or leverage. "Proceed with standard protocols. If he hasn't responded by close of business today, have security retrieve all company property from his last known location." Understood. I spent the next hour reviewing the day's agenda and making final adjustments to the executive committee presentation. This would be my first formal meeting with the remaining leadership team, those who had not been part of Sonny's inner circle, but who would now form the core of Horizon's new direction. At precisely 8:55 a.m., I made my way to the boardroom, taking the chairman's seat at the head of the table. One by one, the department heads arrived. Some I had worked with directly during my active years at the company, others I knew only through observation and reports. Their expressions ranged from curious to cautious to openly enthusiastic. Naomi, Chen, now officially Senior Vice President of Digital Innovation following yesterday's promotion, gave me a subtle but warm smile as she took her seat. Beside her, James Alvarez from Finance looked significantly more relaxed than he had during Clyde's tenure, when his ethical concerns about financial reporting had been repeatedly dismissed. At 9 a.m. sharp, I called the meeting to order. "Good morning," I began, my voice clear and authoritative. Yesterday marked a significant transition for Horizon Realty Group. Today we begin the work of transformation. Each of you is here because you have demonstrated both competence and integrity during your time with the company. Those qualities will be the foundation of our path forward. For the next 2 hours, I led them through the comprehensive strategic plan that Mr. Tanaka and I had developed over the past years. Unlike yesterday's board presentation, which focused on high-level direction, this session delved into specific operational changes, accountability structures, and performance metrics. I introduced the new ethical compliance system, the revised compensation framework that rewarded collaboration rather than internal competition, and the expanded international initiatives that would drive our growth over the next decade. Questions? I asked as the formal presentation concluded. The room was momentarily silent, the volume of information requiring processing. Then James Alvarez cleared his throat. Chairman Nakamura, he began, his tone respectful but direct. These changes represent a significant shift from how the company has operated under previous leadership. How do you suggest we manage the transition, particularly with teams accustomed to different methods? The question was diplomatic but clear. How should they navigate the cultural change after years under Sonny's regime of favoritism and questionable ethics? Transparency, I replied without hesitation. The most destabilizing force in any organization is uncertainty. Be clear about expectations, consistent in their application, and open about the reasons behind changes. Those who thrived under the previous system because of merit will continue to thrive. Those who depended on favoritism will need to adapt or find opportunities elsewhere. Nods around the table indicated appreciation for the straightforward approach. Additional resources will be provided to departments most impacted by yesterday's leadership changes, I continued. HR has prepared transition plans for each area, and I will personally meet with any team experiencing significant disruption. Naomi raised her hand next. The Affordable Housing Initiative, is that still proceeding on the accelerated timeline discussed yesterday? Yes, I confirmed. In fact, I'd like you and James to coordinate on the digital marketing and financing aspects. The project documents will be in your inboxes by noon today. The meeting continued with increasing engagement as the initial wariness gave way to productive discussion. By the time we concluded at 11:15 a.m., the energy in the room had transformed from cautious assessment to collaborative planning, precisely the shift I had hoped to achieve. As the executive team dispersed to brief their respective departments, Mr. Sato approached with an update. Security reports Mr. Reynolds is downstairs, demanding access to the executive floor. He's becoming disruptive. I checked my watch, considering the situation. This confrontation was inevitable. The only variables were timing and audience. Have security escort him to the small conference room on this floor, I instructed after a moment's thought. I'll speak with him briefly. Ensure legal counsel is standing by, but not present in the room. Are you certain that's wise? Mr. Sato asked, his concern evident. It's necessary, I replied. Better to address this directly than allow it to fester. Please inform security I'll be there in 5 minutes. The small conference room had been deliberately chosen for this confrontation. Unlike the main boardroom with its imposing table and ceremonial trappings of power, this space was neutral, functional, and, most importantly, equipped with security cameras and recording capabilities. Whatever transpired in the next few minutes would be documented for legal purposes. I entered to find Sonny pacing the length of the room, his appearance markedly different from his usual polished persona. His hair was disheveled, his normally immaculate suit wrinkled, as though he'd slept in it. When the door opened, he spun around, his expression cycling rapidly from anger to surprise to a strange, calculating intensity. Akiko, he said, his use of my first name a deliberate attempt to re-establish our personal connection. Finally, this has gone far enough. I remained standing near the door, maintaining both physical and emotional distance. Mr. Reynolds, I understand you wish to speak with me. I can give you 10 minutes before my next meeting. Mr. Reynolds? He repeated incredulously. Is that what we're doing now? After 5 years of marriage, I'm suddenly Mr. Reynolds to you? In this building, in this context, yes, I replied evenly. This is a professional setting, and I am addressing you as a former employee of Horizon Realty Group. His laugh held no humor. This is insane. You've had your moment. You've made your point. Now it's time to be realistic. I'm being entirely realistic, I said. Your employment has been terminated for cause. The documentation has been processed. Your company access has been revoked. These are the realities of the situation. He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a confidence. Look, I understand you're angry. I said some things, made some jokes I shouldn't have. But this— He gestured broadly, encompassing the building, the company, the situation. This is an overreaction. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, I replied. The changes at Horizon are not the result of personal grievances, but professional assessments conducted over years. Your performance, ethics, and leadership have been found wanting. The decision is final. His facade of reasonableness slipped, frustration breaking through. You can't just erase 5 years of my career because your feelings were hurt. I built relationships with clients. I developed properties that made millions for this company. You took credit for other people's work, I corrected. You inflated projections, misrepresented meeting outcomes, and created a culture of favoritism that undermined Horizon's performance. All of this is extensively documented. Sonny ran a hand through his hair, his strategy shifting again. The board can't possibly support this. You've manipulated them with whatever story Tanaka fed them before he died. Once they see the full picture— The board has reviewed all relevant documentation, I interrupted. They understand exactly what has occurred and have unanimously endorsed the leadership transition and executive changes. For a moment, he seemed genuinely at a loss, the reality of his situation finally penetrating his denial. Then his expression hardened. And what about our marriage? Was that just part of your corporate espionage too? The question carried genuine hurt beneath its accusatory tone, touching the one aspect of this confrontation I couldn't address with pure professional detachment. Our marriage was real, I said, my voice softening slightly despite my determination to maintain boundaries. At least, it was in the beginning. But it changed, Sonny. You changed when you began to see me as a possession rather than a partner. When my ideas became jokes for you to share with your friends. When my value to you became measured by how well I played the role of the supportive, silent wife. That's not fair, he protested, though with less conviction. I provided for you? No, I cut him off firmly. You didn't provide for me. You spent my money, lived in my house, and built your career on connections facilitated by my company. The fact that you never questioned the math, how a mid-level executive could afford our lifestyle, speaks volumes about your self-deception. He fell silent, absorbing this unassailable truth. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its aggressive edge, replaced by something closer to bewilderment. What happens now? Professionally, your employment with Horizon is terminated. The separation package detailed in your termination documents is generous, provided you sign the non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreements. Personally, the divorce papers have been filed. My attorneys will contact yours to facilitate an equitable division of our legitimately joint assets. That's it? He asked, an emptiness in his voice that might have moved me under different circumstances. 5 years together, and it ends with paperwork and legal teams? It ended long before today, I replied quietly. Today merely makes official what has been true for some time. He looked around the conference room, at the sleek furniture and corporate art, symbols of the power he had believed was his by right. I never really knew you, did I? No, I acknowledged. You never tried to. You were too comfortable with the version of me you created in your mind to look for the reality. Security appeared in the doorway, a silent reminder that our time was concluding. Sonny noticed them and straightened his shoulders, making one final attempt to salvage his dignity. This isn't over, he said, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. I built a reputation in this industry. People respect me. My clients trust me. Your clients trusted Horizon, I corrected. and they will continue to do so under its new leadership. As for your reputation, I paused, not out of cruelty but precision. I suggest focusing on rebuilding it based on actual accomplishments, rather than appropriated credit. He had no response to this, the truth of it too evident to dispute. With a final look that carried more confusion than anger, he allowed security to escort him from the room. I remained standing for a moment after he left, acknowledging the complex emotions his departure stirred. Our marriage had not been a complete fabrication. There had been genuine connection, shared dreams, moments of happiness. But those truths didn't negate the other realities: the casual disrespect, the dismissal of my intelligence, the jokes at my expense that had slowly poisoned whatever love had existed between us. Mr. Sato appeared in the doorway, his expression questioning. "Everything all right, Chairman?" "Yes," I replied, straightening my jacket and refocusing my attention on the day ahead. "Please have legal process Mr. Reynolds's company devices and access cards for retrieval. And let's move up the Affordable Housing Initiative presentation. I'd like to review it before the press announcement tomorrow." As I walked back to my office, I passed Naomi Chen in the hallway, her arms full of presentation materials for our upcoming meeting. She paused, reading something in my expression that prompted a moment of collegial concern. "Difficult confrontation?" she asked discreetly. "A necessary one," I replied. "The past often requires formal closure before we can fully engage with the future." She nodded in understanding, perhaps recognizing from her own experiences the complexity of reclaiming professional power after systematic undermining. "The team is ready when you are. We've incorporated the accelerated timeline for the Tokyo expansion." "Excellent. I'll join you in 5 minutes." Alone in my office, I allowed myself a brief moment of reflection. The confrontation with Sunny represented not just the end of our personal relationship, but the final severance of my connection to the life I had been living, the role I had played for 5 long years. That chapter was now definitively closed. Opening my laptop, I reviewed the afternoon schedule, the affordable housing presentation, calls with our Tokyo partners, meetings with 2 key clients potentially unsettled by the leadership changes. The work ahead was substantial, but energizing. The kind of meaningful, impactful projects I had been orchestrating from the shadows for years and could now drive openly. A notification appeared on my screen, a message from Yumi. "Lunch tomorrow? Much to celebrate." I smiled, typing a quick confirmation. Yes, there was indeed much to celebrate. Not just professional achievements, but personal liberation. For the first time in years, I was fully myself. In my home, in my company, and in the world. The intercom buzzed. "Chairman Nakamura, the team is assembled for the affordable housing presentation." "On my way," I replied, rising from my desk with purposeful energy. The past was acknowledged and released. Now, the future awaited. By mid-afternoon, news of the confrontation with Sunny had spread through the executive floor, despite the discretion of those directly involved. In a company the size of Horizon, information moved with remarkable efficiency, particularly when it involved such a dramatic power shift. The whispers reached me as fragments of conversation that quieted when I approached, concerned glances quickly masked with professional smiles. I neither confirmed nor denied the rumors, understanding that the personal dimension of the story would, inevitably, become part of company lore. What mattered was channeling that energy into productive change, rather than allowing it to become a distraction. The affordable housing presentation had gone exceptionally well, with the team embracing the accelerated timeline and innovative financing structure I had proposed. This initiative, repeatedly dismissed by Sunny and his circle as unprofitable, would actually increase our tax advantages while establishing Horizon as a pioneer in sustainable community development. The first phase can break ground within 60 days, James concluded as the presentation ended. We've already identified 3 potential sites that meet our criteria. Excellent, I replied, reviewing the projections one final time. Let's proceed with site assessments immediately. And James, make sure the community engagement team is involved from the beginning. I want local input incorporated from day one, not as an afterthought. He nodded, making a note. Understood. Very different from our usual approach. Very different results, too, I said with a faint smile. Sometimes the most profitable path isn't the most obvious one. As the team filed out, my executive assistant appeared with an update that I had been anticipating with mixed emotions. Chairman, the remaining executives have completed their exit processing. All company property has been returned, and the separation agreements have been signed, except for Mr. Reynolds. His attorney has submitted a formal request for an extended negotiation period. Denied, I said without hesitation. The terms are non-negotiable. He has until 5 p.m. today to sign the standard agreement, or we proceed with the alternative separation protocol. The alternative protocol was significantly less generous, involving immediate legal action to recover company resources and a formal ethics investigation that would become part of the public record. Sonny's attorney would understand the implications, even if Sonny himself remained defiant. Also, my assistant continued, Mr. Castellano has requested a brief meeting before leaving the building. He's waiting in the small conference room. This was unexpected. Of Sonny's inner circle, Mario Castellano had been perhaps the most problematic, his treatment of female employees creating particular liability for the company. That he would seek a meeting rather than departing quietly suggested either remarkable self-awareness or a misguided attempt at negotiation. I'll see him, I decided after a moment's consideration. Please inform security to remain nearby and ensure the recording system is active. The conference room was the same one where I had confronted Sonny earlier, though the energy was entirely different as I entered to find Mario sitting stiffly at the table. Gone was his usual swagger, replaced by an uncharacteristic formality, as he stood to greet me. Chairman Nakamura, he said, the title sounding foreign from his lips. Thank you for agreeing to see me. I nodded acknowledgement but didn't offer my hand. You requested this meeting, Mr. Castellano. I can give you 5 minutes. He sat back down, his composure slipping slightly. I wanted to clarify some things before I leave. The file you presented contains serious allegations about my conduct. Not allegations, I corrected. Documented incidents with multiple witnesses, and supporting evidence. There's nothing to clarify. The record speaks for itself. That's just it, he said, leaning forward earnestly. The record doesn't tell the whole story. The company culture, the environment, it encouraged certain behaviors. Sonny and Clyde, they set the tone. We were just following their lead. I regarded him with cool assessment. You're a senior vice president, Mr. Castellano, a leader in this organization. Following the lead of those engaging in inappropriate behavior isn't a defense. It's an additional failure of judgment and character. He shifted uncomfortably. I'm not saying it was right. I'm just trying to explain that in a different environment, with different expectations. You would have behaved differently, I finished. For him. Perhaps. We'll never know. What we do know is how you chose to behave in the environment that existed. Those choices have consequences. Mario's expression hardened slightly, a flash of the entitlement I had observed over years of watching him operate. Is there no path back? No consideration for my years of service? My client relationships alone have generated millions for Horizon. Your client relationships were built using company resources, company reputation, and company connections, I replied evenly. They belong to Horizon, not to you personally. As for a path back, I paused, considering my words carefully. The separation agreement includes a clause allowing for reconsideration after 1 year, provided certain conditions are met. Professional, counseling, ethics training, and a demonstrated commitment to changed behavior would be minimum requirements. Hope flickered briefly in his eyes before reality reasserted itself. And in the meantime, my career, my reputation, will reflect your actions, I said simply. The separation agreement includes a neutral reference if you choose to pursue opportunities elsewhere. How you address your departure with potential employers is your decision. Honesty would be advisable. He absorbed this, the gravity of his situation finally appearing to register fully. When he spoke again, his tone had lost its defensive edge. I never would have guessed, he said quietly. All those dinners at your house watching Sonny treat you like... And the whole time, you were actually observing, I supplied when he trailed off. Learning exactly who people were when they believed they held all the power. Mario nodded. Slowly, a new understanding dawning. The things we said, the jokes at your expense. You remember all of it, don't you? Every word, I confirmed. But this isn't about personal grudges, Mr. Castellano. The changes at Horizon reflect professional assessments based on documented performance and behavior. Nothing more, nothing less. He stood, recognizing that our conversation had reached its natural conclusion. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for the position I now find myself in, but for everything else. The apology seemed genuine, if motivated by his current circumstances. I acknowledged it with a slight nod. Noted. I suggest you focus that reflection on making better choices moving forward. Your time at Horizon has ended, but your career needn't be defined solely by your mistakes here. As he moved toward the door, he paused for a final question. Can I ask, was any of it real? Your relationship with Sonny, the quiet housewife act? Or was it all just part of some elaborate corporate strategy? The question echoed Sonny's earlier demand, but without the raw emotion that had colored his inquiry. Mario's interest seemed almost academic, a man trying to understand how thoroughly he had been deceived. The beginning was real, I said after a moment's consideration. The rest became a necessary adaptation to an untenable situation. When one's voice is consistently dismissed, sometimes silence becomes a strategic choice rather than a surrender. He absorbed this, nodding slowly. I think I understand. Goodbye, Chairman Nakamura. And good luck with whatever comes next for Horizon. After he left, I remained seated, reviewing the interaction. Of the 5 executives removed yesterday, Mario had shown the most self-awareness in the aftermath. It wasn't enough to change the outcome. His behavior had been too problematic for too long. But it suggested a capacity for growth that the others, particularly Sonny, had yet to demonstrate. My phone buzzed with a message from legal. Reynolds. Attorney has advised he will sign standard agreement by deadline. Paperwork being processed now. So Sonny had finally accepted the inevitable. The practical part of me was relieved. A protracted legal battle would have been an unnecessary distraction. Yet beneath that pragmatism, I felt a curious sadness. Not regret for the actions taken, but acknowledgement of the relationship that might have been under different circumstances, with different choices. I pushed the thought aside, refocusing on the work ahead. The past couldn't be changed, but the future, Horizon's and my own, remained full of possibility. The news of Horizon's dramatic leadership change spread through the real estate industry with remarkable speed. By the following morning, my inbox contained dozens of messages from industry peers, competitors, and partners, some offering congratulations, others thinly veiling their surprise or skepticism, but all acknowledging the seismic shift that had occurred. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature article headlined, "The Silent Chairman, How Akiko Nakamura Quietly Rebuilt Horizon from Within." The piece painted a largely accurate picture of the succession plan Mr. Tanaka had implemented, though it predictably sensationalized the personal elements of the story. Several industry publications followed with their own analyses, most focusing on the strategic implications for Horizon's market position, rather than the interpersonal drama. What interested me more than the external reactions, however, was the transformation occurring within Horizon itself. The initial shock had given way to a palpable shift in the company's atmosphere, a tentative optimism that emerged as employees began to understand that the changes went beyond a simple leadership transition. I observed this most clearly during my morning walk through the building, an activity I had instituted immediately after taking official control. Unlike Sonny and his circle, who rarely ventured beyond the executive floor, I made a point of visiting different departments each day, speaking directly with employees at all levels. On this particular morning, I noticed significant changes in the marketing department, which had suffered perhaps the most under Liam's leadership. Where tension and competitive silence had previously dominated, I now found collaborative discussion and an energetic buzz of productivity. Designers who had been relegated to executing Liam's dictates regardless of their merit were now openly sharing innovative concepts. The difference is remarkable, Jasmine Park, a senior graphic designer, told me when I stopped to review her team's work on the affordable housing campaign. We've accomplished more creative development in 2 days than we did in the previous month. That's exactly what we need, I replied, genuinely impressed by the concepts they'd developed. This campaign requires authentic community connection, not just polished corporate messaging. In the finance department, James had already implemented a more transparent reporting structure, dismantling the opaque systems Clyde had used to obscure questionable allocations. Junior analysts who had previously been afraid to flag concerns were now actively participating in review processes. "It's like a weight has been lifted," one of them commented during a brief conversation. "We're actually doing accounting the way it's supposed to be done." Perhaps the most profound transformations were occurring among the female employees who had been systematically marginalized under the previous leadership. Women who had kept quiet, minimized their contributions, or adapted their communication styles to navigate the boys' club atmosphere were now speaking with new confidence in meetings and putting forward ideas that would have been dismissed weeks earlier. Naomi's promotion had sent a clear signal that competence rather than connections would determine advancement opportunities. 3 other women had already been moved into positions more reflective of their capabilities, creating a ripple effect of optimism among employees who had previously seen no path forward. The internal company messaging board, once dominated by obligatory responses to official announcements, now featured genuine engagement with new initiatives. The affordable housing project had sparked particular enthusiasm, with employees from various departments volunteering ideas and offering to participate in community outreach efforts. Not everyone embraced the changes, of course. A few executives, who had aligned themselves with Sonny's inner circle while avoiding direct complicity in their misconduct, maintained a cautious distance, their contributions minimal and their expressions guarded during meetings. Several mid-level managers who had benefited from the previous system of favoritism were struggling to adapt to merit-based expectations. I made note of these holdouts, but didn't target them directly. Time would reveal whether they could adapt to Horizon's new direction or would eventually seek opportunities elsewhere. By late afternoon, I received perhaps the most meaningful indication that positive change was taking root. 3 former employees who had left the company due to the toxic environment under previous leadership had reached out to inquire about returning. Among them was Thomas Chen, a brilliant architect whose sustainable design innovations had been repeatedly blocked by Ben, despite their clear market potential. "If the changes I'm hearing about are real," his message read, "I'd like to discuss bringing my team and our sustainable luxury concept back to Horizon." As I drafted a personal response inviting him to meet, I reflected on how quickly a culture could begin to transform when the right conditions were created. The company I had observed from the shadows for 5 years, talented but hampered by poor leadership and toxic dynamics, was starting to emerge as the organization Mr. Tanaka had always envisioned. The ripples were extending beyond Horizon's walls as well. Two clients who had been considering moving their business to competitors had reconnected after hearing about our leadership change and new strategic direction. An industry association focused on sustainability had reached out about partnership opportunities. Even a few investors who had been wary of Horizon's previous approach were expressing renewed interest. Change was happening, faster and more organically than even I had anticipated. 1 week after taking control of Horizon, I sat in my office, reviewing the first comprehensive performance reports produced under the new leadership structure. The data confirmed what I had observed anecdotally. Productivity was up in most departments, client feedback was trending positive, and the affordable housing initiative was progressing ahead of schedule. Yet alongside these encouraging signs, resistance to the new order was crystallizing in predictable ways. My executive assistant placed a folder on my desk containing what she diplomatically called matters requiring attention, a collection of challenges that had emerged from those unwilling to accept the company's new direction. Bradley Thompson is still refusing to implement the transparency protocols in the commercial division, she explained, referring to a regional director who had been closely aligned with Clyde. And there's been some coordinated pushback on the revised compensation structure. I nodded, unsurprised. Who's leading that particular resistance? Primarily Wilson from sales and Adler from development. Both were beneficiaries of the previous bonus system. Of course they were, I murmured, reviewing their personnel files. Both men had consistently received outsized bonuses despite mediocre performance metrics, clear evidence of the favoritism that had permeated Horizon's operations. Schedule meetings with each of them for tomorrow. Individual discussions, not a group confrontation. She nodded, making a note. Also, there's been communication from external sources. Mr. Reynolds appears to be speaking with several of our clients. This was expected but still required attention. Despite the non-disparagement clause in his separation agreement, Sonny was clearly attempting to undermine confidence in Horizon's new leadership. His personal relationships with certain clients created vulnerability that needed to be addressed directly. Prepare briefing packages on those client relationships, I instructed. I'll reach out personally to each one. As my assistant departed, Yumi arrived for our scheduled strategy meeting, her expression betraying a mix of amusement and concern. I see the resistance has organized, she commented, glancing at the folder on my desk. Predictable but manageable, I replied, gesturing for her to take a seat. Anyone clinging to the old system was bound to push back. The question is whether they're salvageable or determined to sabotage progress. And Sonny, I hear he's been quite active among his industry contacts, I nodded. Also predictable. His ego won't allow him to accept defeat gracefully. He's approaching clients he believes are personally loyal to him, suggesting that Horizon's new direction threatens their interests. Will it work? She asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. With some, perhaps temporarily, I acknowledged. But ultimately, results speak louder than rumors. We're already showing improved performance metrics that will matter, more to serious clients than personal relationships. Our discussion shifted to strategic matters: the Tokyo expansion, the Sustainable Development Initiative, the digital transformation that Naomi was spearheading. Yet the undercurrent of resistance remained a factor in our planning, requiring adjustments and contingencies. The following day, I met individually with the employees identified as centers of resistance. Bradley Thompson arrived at my office with barely concealed resentment, his posture rigid and his responses clipped as we discussed the transparency protocols he had been avoiding. These new requirements create unnecessary bureaucracy, he argued. My team's performance speaks for itself. We don't need additional oversight. Performance without accountability isn't sustainable, I replied calmly. The protocols aren't punishment, Mr. Thompson. They're standard business practice in every reputable real estate firm. They weren't necessary under previous leadership, he countered, the implication clear in his tone. Previous leadership made exceptions based on personal relationships rather than sound business principles, I said, my voice firm but not confrontational. That approach ended with their tenure. The choice now is straightforward. Adapt to Horizon's new standards or seek opportunities elsewhere. His expression revealed the calculation occurring behind his eyes, weighing his chances of outlasting this new regime against the personal cost of continued resistance. I'll implement the protocols, he said finally, though his tone suggested this was a tactical retreat rather than genuine acceptance. Good, I replied, making a note in his file. I look forward to seeing the improved transparency in next week's reports. Similar conversations played out with Wilson and Adler regarding the compensation restructuring. Both eventually agreed to work within the new system, though I harbored no illusions about their genuine commitment. They would require ongoing monitoring and clear consequences for any attempts to undermine the changes. Not all resistance came from within, however. That afternoon, I received word that one of our largest clients, a luxury condominium developer with whom Sunny had cultivated a close relationship, was considering pulling their business following conversations with my former husband. Rather than addressing this through intermediaries, I called the client directly. Mr. Patel, I began when he answered. This is Akiko Nakamura, chairman of Horizon Realty Group. I understand you have concerns about our continued partnership. His surprise at my direct approach was evident in his hesitation before responding. Ms. Nakamura, yes, I've been hearing some concerning things about Horizon's new direction, moving away from luxury development, staff upheaval. Sonny Reynolds has always handled our account personally. I'm familiar with your portfolio, I replied. In fact, I reviewed your Lakeside project just last week and have some thoughts on how we might increase its market position through sustainable luxury enhancements, a growing sector among high-net-worth buyers. The conversation that followed was substantive and specific, demonstrating my detailed knowledge of his projects and offering concrete value that transcended personal relationships. By the call's end, Mr. Patel had not only committed to maintaining his business with Horizon but had expressed interest in our new sustainable luxury initiative. I appreciated Sunny's friendship, he admitted as our conversation concluded. But ultimately, this is business. Your approach is refreshingly direct. As I hung up, I reflected on the nature of resistance and acceptance in times of change. Some would never adapt, their identities too wrapped up in the previous order. Others would assess the new reality pragmatically, adjusting their position based on self-interest. And some would genuinely embrace change, recognizing its potential, benefits even through the discomfort of transition. Horizon was experiencing all three responses simultaneously, requiring different strategies for each. The key was identifying which individuals fell into which category and responding accordingly, with patience, clarity, or, when necessary, decisive action. 3 months after taking official control of Horizon Realty Group, I stood on the construction site of our first affordable housing development, watching as community members participated in the groundbreaking ceremony. What had begun as a concept dismissed by Sunny and his circle as unprofitable had transformed into Horizon's most publicized initiative, and, somewhat ironically, one of our most financially promising ventures once the tax incentives and government partnerships were properly structured. The project represented more than just a strategic pivot. It embodied the systemic changes that had taken root throughout the organization. The development team included both experienced Horizon employees and new talent recruited specifically for their expertise in sustainable community building. The financing structure incorporated innovative approaches developed by James and his revitalized finance department. The marketing materials, created under Naomi's direction, emphasized community integration and long-term social impact rather than the quick profit messaging that had dominated under previous leadership. The community response has exceeded our projections, Thomas Chen noted as he joined me at the edge of the site. His return to Horizon as Director of Sustainable Design had been a significant win, bringing not only his considerable talent but also a symbolic affirmation of the company's new direction. The waiting list for Phase 1 is already full, I confirmed, and the financing model has attracted attention from 3 municipal governments interested in similar partnerships. We watched as local officials, community representatives, and Horizon team members mingled during the ceremony, the interactions marked by genuine engagement rather than the superficial networking that had characterized company events in the past. It's not just this project, Thomas said thoughtfully. The entire company feels different. Even the headquarters has a different energy. He was right. The physical space of Horizon's offices had evolved alongside its culture. The executive floor, once an isolated domain of closed doors and exclusive access, had been redesigned with more transparent architecture and collaborative spaces. My own office featured glass walls that could be frosted for privacy when needed, but remained clear for most of the day, symbolizing the accessibility that characterized my leadership approach. The changes extended far beyond aesthetics. New ethical guidelines had been implemented company-wide, with clear reporting mechanisms and consistent consequences for violations. The compensation structure now rewarded collaboration and long-term value creation rather than short-term gains. Promotion criteria had been standardized, eliminating the favoritism that had previously determined advancement. Perhaps most significantly, Horizon's workforce had diversified remarkably in just 3 months. With barriers to advancement removed and genuine meritocracy established, talented professionals who had previously been marginalized found opportunities to contribute at levels commensurate with their abilities. The executive team, once exclusively male and predominantly white, now reflected a broader range of perspectives and experiences. The results were already evident in our performance metrics. Client retention had stabilized after an initial period of uncertainty, with several major accounts that had been considering departure now expanding their engagement. Employee satisfaction scores had improved dramatically, and recruitment of top talent had become significantly easier as word spread about Horizon's transformation. The financial indicators were equally promising. While the transition had initially created some market uncertainty, our stock had stabilized and begun to climb as investors recognized the substantive improvements in operations and strategic positioning. The first quarterly earnings report under my official leadership had exceeded analyst expectations, driven by more efficient operations and several innovative projects that had previously been suppressed under Sunny's risk-averse approach. As for the resistance that had emerged in the early weeks, it had largely resolved itself through natural selection. Bradley Thompson had ultimately resigned, unable to adapt to the transparency requirements and unwilling to acknowledge that his previous success had been built on favoritism rather than merit. Wilson and Adler had made similar exits after finding themselves unable to justify their positions when held to objective performance standards. A few others who had initially resisted had surprised me by embracing the new direction once they experienced its benefits. Jenkins from the legal department, once closely allied with Clyde, had become one of our most effective advocates for ethical compliance after discovering how much easier his job became when not constantly navigating questionable decisions from leadership. The external landscape had evolved as well. Sunny and his former colleagues had initially attempted to damage Horizon's reputation through industry connections, but their efforts gained little traction as our results spoke for themselves. Mario had taken a position with a smaller firm in another city, apparently applying some lessons from his experience at Horizon to rebuild his career on a more sustainable foundation. Clyde and Ben had largely disappeared from the industry radar, their reputations too damaged by the evidence that had emerged following their departures. Sunny himself had perhaps the most difficult adjustment. The divorce had been finalized without the dramatic court battle his initial posturing had threatened, reality eventually overcoming his desire for revenge. Industry sources reported he was attempting to establish his own boutique real estate consultancy, though without the backing of Horizon's resources and connections, his progress was limited. I maintained a professional distance from these developments, neither celebrating their struggles nor intervening to ease their transitions. The consequences they faced were not punishment, but the natural result of their own choices. A reality I had accepted for myself long ago when I chose to play the long game rather than seeking immediate validation. As the groundbreaking ceremony concluded, I participated in the traditional photo opportunity with community leaders and project partners. The local newspaper reporter covering the event approached for a brief interview. Chairman Nakamura, this project represents quite a departure from Horizon's traditional focus, she observed. What inspired this new direction? I considered my response carefully, aware that my answer would become part of both Horizon's public narrative and my own professional legacy. Horizon has always been about creating value through real estate, I replied. What's evolved is our understanding of what constitutes true value. Sustainable development that serves communities while delivering strong returns for investors isn't a departure from our mission. It's a more complete fulfillment of it. As I returned to the office later that afternoon, I paused in the lobby to observe the newly installed art piece that had replaced the imposing corporate portrait of Sunny that once dominated the space. The new installation featured Mr. Tanaka's favorite Japanese proverb, rendered in both English and Japanese. Vision without action is a daydream. Action without vision is a nightmare. The systemic change at Horizon wasn't just about new policies or different leadership personalities. It represented a fundamental realignment of vision and action, a company rediscovering its purpose and restructuring its operations to fulfill that purpose authentically. Stepping into the elevator, I reflected on the personal journey that had paralleled the company's transformation. The roles I had played, the quiet wife, the hidden strategist, the patient observer, had served their purpose, but they were parts of a past I had now transcended. The woman who stood in this elevator, heading to her office to lead a company she had rebuilt from within, was finally, completely herself, Akiko Nakamura, not defined by relationship to others or by cultural expectations, but by her own vision, actions, and achievements. The elevator doors opened on the executive floor, where my team awaited with updates on the Tokyo expansion, the digital transformation initiative, and the sustainable luxury concept that Thomas was developing. The future stretched before us, full of possibilities that had been merely theoretical under the previous regime. This, I thought as I stepped forward to meet it, is what power looks like when it serves a purpose beyond itself. To all the women, watching this story unfold, I want to share something important with you. Power isn't always about who speaks the loudest or who holds the official title. Sometimes, true strength lies in strategic patience, in observing, learning, and preparing while others underestimate you. I spent years being dismissed, my ideas mocked, my intelligence questioned simply because I appeared to fit someone else's limited perception of who I should be. But all that time, I wasn't just enduring, I was building, planning, and growing stronger. Remember this. You don't need to diminish yourself to make others comfortable. Your intelligence is not a threat to be hidden. Your ambition is not something to apologize for. The path to reclaiming your power might not be direct. It might require difficult choices and moments of strategic silence, but never confuse temporary adaptation with permanent acceptance of limitations others place on you. Your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it. And when you finally step into the fullness of who you are, without apology, without compromise, you'll find that true power was within you all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Be patient. Be strategic. Be unstoppable. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.